Hi, good afternoon. This is Casey Green. I'm here in San Diego, and we are at the ASU GSV Innovation Summit. Thank you all for joining us. I understand there are about 40 people, and this is Wendy Leduc, who is the group publisher. I got that right?
Yes, you got that right.
All right, from eSchool Media. eSchool Media is our media partner for these interviews. We're doing 3 days, about 30 some odd interviews with folks across the spectrum: college presidents, district superintendents, education entrepreneurs, executives from a variety of tech companies. Conversation about innovation in education. Wendy, thank you for joining me. And Wendy, thank you for being, you and I put this together. Let us take a moment for our own shameless self-promotion. That we did this, and we did this with Shindig. So that's great.
Pretty great.
A little bit of housekeeping just for our audience. There are two icons in the lower corner. You can raise your hand icon, letting us know you'd like to have a talk with us for a little bit. So, Wendy, let's frame the conversation. This is the 7th year of the conference. There's some 3,500 people here in San Diego. It started with a couple hundred people in Phoenix. It's a joint venture with Arizona State University and GSV Global Silicon Valley. You've covered this conference for a while. You've been to a number of these things, as have I. What happens here, and why should attention be paid?
Well, from my perspective, and I have been covering it for a long time, which is a nice way of saying that I'm old. But
Wendy.
but the thing that happens here that doesn't happen at the other conferences that we attend throughout the year on the education side there's some very strategic conversations at high levels with all stakeholders in our education system. So I find it very refreshing. It is often a conversation that to some would be upsetting because it's really disruptive in terms of the way that education is being discussed. Technology is a component or a tool for a lot of that disruption, so that is a part of the conversation. But when you get the stakeholders, where the industry partners, higher ed, colleges, K-12 educators, everybody is here focused on the same thing, which is the intent to make education better for all students, regardless of where they fall in the spectrum of education.
So let's talk for a moment about a little bit of that tone and tenor, because that's really a conversation about change. It's a conversation that involves risk. And I suspect in the privacy of some of these conversations, sometimes in the hallways, sometimes perhaps in public presentations, there's also a lot of candor about what needs to be done better in both K-12 and higher ed. Is that fair?
That is fair, and I think the difference in the conversation here versus other gatherings that we all attend throughout the year, everybody talks about what needs to be done better, and there's no shortage of that. Even if you read mainstream media, there's always a conversation around what needs to be done better. What seems to happen here are there actually people who have really innovative ideas and approaches to how we could be doing things better in ways that we haven't thought of before, and in partnering with partners that we've never partnered with before in order to be able to facilitate the kind of change or evolution that we need to see in our education system.
So I want to take some of that apart a little bit. When you talk about these partnering conversations, are you at liberty to provide some examples? Because I think in many ways, for many of our audience, we're a long way from K-12 schools and college campuses in terms of the conversations that happen here, the assumptions or the inferences about what goes on here. Let's try and ground it in a way that we can sort of make it, if you will, let's make it real.
So there are a couple of different kinds of partnership conversations that happen here. Some of those partnership conversations are on the industry side. It's with businesses that are looking at other businesses that provide basically assets or things that would help them to be a stronger player in the market. There's the business side of the partner conversation. Right. But then you also have K-12 educators talking with higher education educators, and people really trying to really get their handle around, it is an entire ecosystem at this point. You have industry panels that talk about, this is what we want in our future workforce. These are the products that we want to see you, higher education, graduating. These are the skill sets that we need to have in order to have employable people in the future. And we feel that the way the system is now is not working. So let's have the conversation around what are these skill sets that we need to see. Then the higher education universities are in turn talking to the high schools and secondary educators and saying, okay, if we're responsible for this level of product, for lack of a better term. These are the skills that we need to see, and how are we going to work together to enable these students to be able to move into the future employability that is before them.
Long ago in a graduate seminar, many decades ago, faculty, a prof walked in, slams the books on the desk and says, implementation is the movement of cup to lip. So I want to press you a little bit more about some of these cup to lip issues as they relate to the conversations here. Sort of partnerships, timelines. Education is notoriously slow in terms of dealing with change. There's a rigidity of the calendar. There's a rigidity of the bureaucracy. There's sometimes, admittedly, there's a rigidity in some people are pushing for change and others just saying, leave me alone and just let me do my stuff. So what is that movement of cup to lip in the context of what happens here? The young company that comes and presents and say, we've got an innovative widget or a new service. The companies that find one another either by intent or randomly in a conversation say, let us be friends, let us go forth together to do better. And the large corporations that are often here, admittedly, looking for novel ideas, interesting solutions, tremendous talent that, quite honestly, often gets bought. There's a lot of venture capital here as well. A lot of investment capital.
And that's one of the exciting aspects about this particular event. And one thing I would like to communicate out to the people that aren't able to attend this particular conference is this is one of the most exciting times of the year for me. When I look at all the young entrepreneurs who have consciously made a decision that education is the market that they want to launch their new businesses in. I've never seen the number that we have this year. It's been growing steadily through the years, but I find it very hopeful that a lot of the younger people that are in the different industries and in very entrepreneurial spirit have chosen education as being the place where they truly want to make a difference. The other side of your question, however, I've been in education and ed tech specifically for 30 years, and I have never seen the market so engaged in conversation about change. I remember when I first started many, many years ago, A Nation at Risk had just been published, and all the publicity and hoopla around how far behind we were globally in terms of what we produce in our education product. And yet I find that the conversation has escalated to the point where it's more than a conversation, and people are actually sitting down at the table and willing to make changes, hard changes in the way that they've always done things, because quite honestly, even if it's higher education, which we know is historically slow to change, their customers, their students, are becoming much more savvy consumers, and that pressure is going to initiate some of the change that needs to happen even in higher education.
I want to compare and contrast two periods. There's been a huge surge in investment, both in K-12 and higher ed ventures, however we want to call them, over the last couple of years. And it's hard not to look back and say, this looks an awful lot like the dot-com era. Mm-hmm. I'm mindful of a conversation I had with Michael Moe 2 years ago at the Consumer Electronics Show. Michael is one of the principals of GSV, and we're very appreciative of GSV of providing this opportunity to do these programs from the summit. And talking with Michael, what struck me is that during the dot-com era, his comment was, well, it's different now then because the infrastructure is better. Let's stipulate that. The technology is a lot better in terms of wireless, in terms of all kinds of parts. But the other thing that struck me is that as I think about the people who are going into education during the dot-com era, they were people and talent searching for a problem, as opposed to this cycle seems to be different, particularly with the startups. These are people who are coming out of education. At this conference and elsewhere, there's a lot of people, for example, who in their portfolios can cite Teach for America, mm-hmm. or some other direct experience in a classroom or on a college campus and saying, I can do better. I've got an idea. I'm coming out, as opposed to scouting around and saying, oh, we can take this technology and drop it there. Is that a fair assumption? Is that sort of a fair assessment of what one of the things that's different now versus then? Oh,
I find it to be very different now. And I think that a lot of the young entrepreneurs that are here mm-hmm. are here because they sat, whether it was in a university classroom or they were a part of Teach for America or wherever they came from, they felt they have a solution to a problem. They've come up with a solution to a problem, and they've made the investment in figuring out a way to turn that into a business. But at the end of the day, most of the young entrepreneurs that I've had the pleasure of meeting with, they truly want to make a difference. and they want to leave a bigger footprint than what historically, I think our last round during the dot-com days, which by the way was one of my favorite times in business history, because it was like the roaring 20s.
It was a great time to be part of it. The actual outcomes a little more, uncertain.
Falling off the cliff was not fun, but the rise up was a blast. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a lot more discipline this time around. I think we've all learned from what happened the last time. But at the same time, I do agree, and I think the difference between this new generation of entrepreneur who's looking at the education space is basically fueled not only about wanting to build a company, but truly wanting to do something good socially.
You said a couple of moments ago, you also felt that there was a culture that's much more receptive to change than it's been in the past. So 2016 is the 10th anniversary of the Spellings Report, in terms of a very critical report about higher education, about accountability, about accessibility, about data and metrics. Again, you and I have watched a lot of this. Have things changed that much in the 10 years from the Spelling Report to now in terms of just what colleges need to do better and how they get to that point of moving cup to lip?
I think the thing that's changed is the college's willingness to sit down and discuss it.
Okay.
I think in the past, from my experience anyway, there was not a lot of discussion. This is the way we do things, and we're successful at doing things this way, so this is the way we will continue to do things. Mm-hmm. So from where I sit, it's really the openness to have a discussion and kind of investigate new ways of looking, new models, new ways of looking at things, and incorporating more people in those conversations. And that's happening on the K-12 side as well. And I think one of the interesting illustrations of the growth in that conversation is when you look at the amount of attendees at this conference, specifically the amount of educators that are here to have these discussions and be a part of these discussions. It's very impressive how quickly this has grown over the last 2 years in terms of that segment of this audience.
So let's talk about those well-intentioned entrepreneurs, mm-hmm. often now coming out of classrooms, coming out of college campuses. They have a personal experience that I can do this better, we need to do this better. What are some of the things that they do well? They bring a lot of enthusiasm, they bring a lot of talent, they bring a reference point about something needs to be better. Let's sort of take that side of it first and then come back to what are the things that they need to do better that they don't understand about being in the K-12 and higher ed market.
I think the thing that they do the best or that serves them best is that they don't know that they can't.
Okay.
They are not jaded. They have not been told over and over again that this will not work, this cannot work. No. I think that it's very much they feel that it's an open territory. They have an idea, they have a vision, and they have no reason to believe that they won't be successful at achieving that.
And 2 or 3 things they need to do better that they just really don't understand about the higher ed or the K-12 market that comes as a real surprise.
K-12 market, for everybody that enters it on the industry side, I think it's a surprise. They think that they know, but I think that they really need to get a better handle on being patient. Mm-hmm.
They're both incredibly slow in terms of decision cycles. The calendar is incredibly rigid in terms of when they can move new things in and new technologies and new training.
Well, and when you look at the accountability that they have versus other industries, that's, a very big driver for why things move so slowly. If you take the political and the policy complications out of it, but just even the fact that the accountability for decisions that are made, especially decisions that involve the kind of change that we're talking about here, then people do move a little bit more slowly. And that's why it makes sense to have other people sitting at the table, engaged in the conversations and contributing solutions so it doesn't always just fall on one person.
Like one of the things that I tell the folks that I work with, at least in my background is higher ed exclusively, you go in both, is that one of the things that's striking about this market is that people talk. It's a neural network. The example I often use is that imagine if you are a technology provider to the higher ed market. I suspect there's some of this in K-12 as well. It's as if you were a blackjack dealer and everybody at the table is not only counting cards, but they're sharing their counts. Mm-hmm. You'd never see that in any other sector. If you go to a technology conference for a major company, IBM, Oracle, a college publisher, whatever it might be, you might get companies that or organizations that might be nominal competitors that they'll do tier 1 level disclosure. Yes, we all use the widget and we think it's wonderful. They're not going to tell you the secret sauce. Education will talk about the secret sauce and what makes it unique and how it runs and what parts of it don't work. Your experience as well?
Oh, that's why I've been in this market for 30 years.
Yeah.
There's no place like it. And the willingness of everyone to sit down at the table and have a discussion about what's working and what isn't working, because at the end of it all, we're all here for the same reason, which is the students.
What else do the entrepreneurs need to know?
I think that the importance of partnerships, I think now, especially with the advancement in technology and all the different components that can really make a company terrific, it doesn't really make sense to me anyway, as much as it did in the past, to go it by yourself. You know, it's finding good partners who can add value to what it is that you're bringing to market and build a much more compelling solution for a lot of students. And I think that they just probably need to be a little bit more open in terms of not wanting to own it all, not one person having to do it all. Because frankly, even from a society perspective, we all are in this together, and we all have to work together to figure out a way to make it better.
I agree with you in principle about partnerships, but I also know that in the tech community, partner has become a verb. It's not a verb. You know, we are partnering with, and it's kind of like, okay, let's who gets in the van before we make the appointment to show up. My sense, at least again in higher ed, is people are looking for karatza. You know, if you're going to bring a partner to a conversation with me, I want to know you've shared medical records and deep dark secrets. It's not somebody who's sort of been bolted on at coming in and, you know, they're going to be the first call, but they have nothing else. I want share service. I want one throat to choke. That apply to K-12 as well?
You know, listening to you say that I just think K-12 probably isn't as jaded. Let me just put it that way.
Right. That's fair.
And I think that young people have a tendency to be a little bit more open as well.
Yeah.
They're much more giving in terms of information and sharing. But I just think that that's part of their culture versus the culture that we've grown up in.
Right.
They don't have the battle scars that we have, perhaps, and hopefully they won't get them. But I do think that K-12 is a little bit easier to basically participate in that kind of dialogue.
We've talked a lot about the entrepreneurs. We've talked a lot about the culture. Let's turn the other side. If I'm a school superintendent, if I'm a C-suite executive, I'm an official administrator at college or university, what do those folks need to do better in their conversations with technology providers?
I think that they need to be comfortable asking the hard questions. And it's important to put the onus on the companies that they want to partner with to answer those hard questions, and make sure that if they are going to invest in that kind of relationship or that partnership, that they're going to get the support and the resources they need to be able to continue to be able to provide that service or product.
Wendy, great. So to our audience, this is the beginning of 3 days, some 30 interviews that we're going to be doing. They're going to be running about 12, 15, 18 minutes, as this one did. Wendy and I were the people who put this program together in collaboration with Shindig. We'll be coming in and out periodically in terms of what we're learning and what we're seeing at the ASU GSV event. And we'll have a closing conversation at 4 o'clock Pacific time, 7 o'clock Eastern time on Wednesday, after we have a long week and we do a lot of these things. We're going to have fun, and we hope we can share some of the excitement of being here with all of you who are listening in. And the archives will be available. We will be posting them. If you've registered, we'll be sending out a lot of emails about when you can get access to the archives, because we know that there'll be a lot of folks who obviously can't block out 4 hours a day to sit in front of a screen listening to these interviews. Wendy, thank you.
No problem. My pleasure.
Great.
Fun.
Bye.